today's episode on the BizBlend Podcast. I'm your host, Sana, as always. And now, you know what, listeners? Sometimes growth in business, it feels like this, what should I say, sprinting uphill with a backpack full of rocks. Every step heavy, every process clunky, and people misaligned. But just imagine, what if growth didn't have to feel like that? What if scaling a business wasn't about grinding harder, but about aligning smarter, connecting people and processes in a way that makes growth sustainable, not exhausting? Interesting, right, listeners? Well, today on this episode, we are going to dive into the practical steps that make that possible. My guest knows this terrain very well. From surviving the chaos of poor leadership in small business trenches to helping a construction company double its revenue through intentional systems, he has seen how growth can either crush morale or set people free. And now, as the founder of Living Water and author of Exit Without Leaving, he has created a framework to help businesses grow without losing their soul. So, listeners, meet my incredible guest, Harrison Tash. Harrison, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really pumped up for this discussion.
Well, thanks for having me. And that was a great intro. I felt inspired just by listening to you. That was awesome.
Good. Oh my God, that's really flattering, Harrison. That's really flattering. Thank you so much, and yeah, let's begin. So you say that and you talk about how unclear direction and reactive chaos, it can crush a business. Okay, so for leaders who are listening right now, what do you think is the very first step they should take to align people and processes before even thinking about growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. You could probably slice and dice this in many different ways, thinking about where people are. But in just a general broad sense, we should always start with ourselves. I think the example is probably overused, but I still like it. In an emergency on an airplane, you don't grab the oxygen mask for somebody else. You grab it for yourself first, right? And our health, whether it's mental or physical, emotional, spiritual, all these kind of health components have to start with the person who's really leading the whole organization. And so the starting point is you for sure. And I know that's one of those broad type of answers, but I'll dive a little deeper and give like the kind of step two, if you will, which is who are the
Yeah.
healthy leaders running your business with you? And if you can focus there and really put in the time with them, you are basically duplicating yourself. And that those top line leaders are where you're going to get the most ROI. And we know this in business, but yet it's so hard for us. So if you think about it, when you think about spending time with people to actually invest in them, it is one of those like daunting tasks to think I got to stop doing what I do. I run the business and invest in them into the section of the business for them. Whether you're small or large, it doesn't matter. You have to be able to set aside time to invest in those healthy leaders who are then going to run the business with you, but also for you.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And that's so important. And, especially you mentioned, like, we have heard till now good leaders, efficient leaders, um, healthy leaders. I think that's something. It's a very interesting term coined in there, Harrison. I think it's kind of redefining leadership in there, which starts with an individual perspective in there, a kind of inner work needed in there, and then it percolates down, or it trickles down to, or kind of ripples outward towards your team members or your people or your team. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
well, And
Mhm.
yeah, you're exactly right. It definitely does trickle into every pocket of your organization when you do focus on those healthy leaders. But
Mhm.
that term "healthy leaders" is termed, it's coined for our 8 to Great, model that we use, and it's the whole concept of the book that I wrote, Exit Without Leaving, is that you build a business that thrives with you, but it doesn't depend on you.
What?
And so when we're thinking about how do we do this, we say there's 8 components that if you focus so heavily on these, you will be able to create that kind of business. And you just split it into 2 broad sections. You have the foundational 4 and you have the operational 4. And this is the great mix between people and process. But the whole thing starts intentionally with the first one, which is healthy leaders.
Hmm. I agree. I agree, Harrison. Um, and if a leader feels like they're already deep in the chaos, first of all, how does a leader understand? Does it always require going personally and interacting with, talking, having conversations with your team members, or are there any red flags in there to identify? Because if we are not aware about the problem, if we do not accept that yes, there is a problem, there is a gap in there, I'm not sure, how exactly a solution comes out in there.
Yeah. So are you asking about a solution for if there's a pocket in the organization where there's not healthy leaders, or what is the solution that you're looking for, you think?
No, so I'm actually trying to understand the red flags in there. Like, first to try to understand, whether there's a problem or not, or if there is, then, what kind of red flags a leader can actually identify to assess.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, this is gonna be different for every organization, especially in the industry that you're in, right?
Uh, okay.
I think, you can probably hear a lot of experts talk about, many different things that you can identify as red flags, and some of those are gonna be pretty universal in some ways. But
Mhm.
I think you have to first look at where your business is. Are you going down the right path, first off? And there's really only 2 paths, broad paths in business. You're either competing for price or you're trying to be unique and different. And when you think about it in those 2 broad roads, you look at that and you say, if you're just competing on price, your business is going to be very cutthroat. It's going to feel very um, just intrigued and engulfed into that price and how do we get it down and how do we like get the best product for the best price, and it just forces you to do things in a different way. But if you go down this path of trying to be unique and different,
Mhm.
you're going to look at red flags in a different way, right? You're not gonna be focused just on price, you're gonna be focused on so many other things. And so, I typically like to work with people who want to be different, set themselves apart in the workplace. And red flags that you might see in a business who is maybe you talked about earlier with that, the backpack full of rocks,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, it feels like you're going uphill, it feels like you're just in chaos. Well, we have to look at, when we look at the people and process side of things, we talked about healthy leaders already. So what's some of the red flags of leaders that you can look for? One,
Mm.
do they concentrate on the healthy leader's gig? And I'll break this down just real quick for you. Are they growing, investing, and guiding the people around them in your organization? And of course, this requires you to kind of put up this leadership mirror and say, okay, am I growing, investing, and guiding in the people around me? And of course, encompassed in this is that you have to be able to hold yourself accountable and others accountable. And my favorite part of what kind of wraps the gig up is, are you willing to learn from anything and anyone? And so that's an indicator in itself is are your leaders able to adopt that kind of mindset and action in the business? But other red flags that I think are really good to kind of pinpoint is, do your values permeate throughout the whole organization. Now, I don't think values need to stop right with the person leading the organization. It needs to be organizational values, company-led values. What do we value as a company? And if you look at different pockets of your organization, you have to say, okay, does this department reveal the values that we talk about? Are you talking about the values? Do people permeate those values? Do they mimic those values? Do they live them out and do they believe in them? You can't have great scalability as a business if your values can't be scaled because you'll have differences throughout the organization that are going to reveal that you have gaps. Now,
Yeah.
we're talking about people and process, so I'll give you just you want me to give just maybe a few more flags on the process side maybe?
Please go ahead. Go ahead, Harrison.
Well, I think the one, indicator on your operational side is, do people understand the strategy of your business? The vision of where it's heading, where you see yourself in 3 to 5 years on the horizon, but also, a lot of people have said, like, "Quit planning so far ahead and just plan for the next few years because things change too much." I disagree. I think we need to see what we want our businesses to look like in 10 plus years. We would call this the always vision because it feels like you're constantly moving towards it, one mountaintop at a time. But
Mhm.
when you look at this, this is where strategy starts. It's where you're pointing towards. And if you go around at different parts of your business, of your company, and you ask people, "Hey, what is our strategy?" And if they don't know what are the things that you're really working on, when I say strategy, I just mean very practically. What do we want to look like in 3 to 5 years? And if you break that down backwards, what are the things that we're doing to work towards that? And if we can't if different parts of your company can't define those very well, then you got a problem operationally because you're not in the same mindset. But then beyond strategy, you're looking at the day to day, and this is where people get the most concerned. Well, we're inconsistent. Well, our quality isn't the same from here to there. Our customers aren't giving us the same reviews. We're getting these mixed reviews. And this is where systems come in. And so the red flag on systems is inconsistency. If there's inconsistency throughout your company at different whether it's different territories or in different projects or in different wings of your company, if you look at it and there's inconsistency, then you have a system problem. You have a leadership problem probably because your leaders are the ones that are going to lead those systems. And systems really are you're going to try to find those red flags with okay, we're inconsistent here, or we didn't do what we promised we would do, and so we got to work backwards and say, you got to ask the questions of why is this happening, right? And then you just keep asking why. Well, we didn't have we don't have a set guideline of meetings, and those meetings aren't these meetings aren't being consistent in what we're trying to solve. Okay, well, why are those meetings not, and you just keep going backwards and backwards on the why. Why is this happening? Right. So those are some red flags that I think that, in any company, you can look at them and say, are these things happening in our business?
That's very well explained, Harrison. Very well explained. I really like the clear distinction when it comes to people and processes. But of course, these two pillars, they are interconnected in each other. Um, and yeah, some really golden nuggets in there for our listeners. And talking about problems, your story, Harrison, it begins not in a boardroom, but you know, kind of metaphorically, trenches of a small business under poor leadership. What was the hardest lesson you learned in those early days, watching what not to do?
That's a great question, and I think we should definitely reflect on those lessons learned just as much as we reflect on the wins celebrated, right? And if I look back, being under some poor leadership in a small business, like this was kind of like right out of college, and I didn't know up from down when it came to business, and this is decades ago, and I look at that and I'm like, The main thing that I saw was just a person in leadership position who wasn't genuine. They didn't lead with a blameless mentality, and what I mean by that is they just did the right things because they knew that doing the right things led to the right outcomes. So there was just some unethical pieces there, charging customers more than what was, quoted, charging people for things that never happened. And I saw this poor leadership and even beyond that, just emotionally, like no investment in its top line leadership. So people that were actually making the business money and leading the people of the business, the owner did not invest in those people at all. It was more of a sink or swim, which can be good in some circumstances, but if it's 100% of the time, I'm telling you that's very unhealthy. Even if it does create performance, it doesn't create sustainability. And so seeing this, it just instilled in me and it definitely left a mark, where I understood that when those things happen in the business, when you have that unhealthy top line leadership, it really hits the bottom line. And how that happens typically and what I've seen is that there's this quiet, silent disagreement. There's this fear that if we say something, how are the people going to respond? How's the owner going to respond? And so there was 0 innovation, there was 0, ownership where people took they had ambition and took the willpower to integrate and do great things in the business. It was really just go do your job,
Exactly.
and it just stifled people. It just really paused the organization at the revenue level it was at. It created, I mean, I even remember there was some other companies that we worked with that blacklisted us because they just didn't like working with the owner, and they
Wow.
might have even liked some of the other people in the company, but they didn't like the owner because they didn't know if they could trust him, right? So, these are the things that I saw that's like, okay, if we were to turn this on its head and kinda do the opposite, what would happen? And this is what got me curious early on in my career is like, how do you be the opposite of that? And obviously, that's why I talk about how people and process really form culture. And I don't really mention product because if you don't have a good product, then don't even talk about the rest. You've got to have a product to build on. But
Oh,
most of the companies that we've ran into, they have a good product, but people and processes where people start to get a little bit confused or even just they negate some of the foundational items of how to be strong in business with those two areas, people and process.
mm, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. 100%. And been there, Harrison. Been there. Huh,
It leaves a mark, right? Like you know it and you feel it when you're in bad leadership.
exactly. And especially if it's, just the beginning of your career, then I think it's kind of a blessing in disguise because you know what uh, how to identify that, even if um, as an employee, as a person, you are going to be a part of any company or organization, or working with a founder or an owner, and it's kind of a ticking time bomb in there. It's a ticking time bomb.
No, you're right. And it's kind of the quote is not specific to one person, but so it's kind of an unknown quote. But it says, "People won't remember what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel." And I think that really encompasses what healthy leadership's about. If people feel your genuineness, they feel that you care, they feel like you're actually investing in them and trying to grow them and guiding them. These are the things that people are going to remember. And they're also going to remember if you don't do those things, they're going to remember the bad things just as much.
True, true. I couldn't agree more with you, Harrison. And you mentioned about talking about when we were talking about healthy leaders. You mentioned about the 8 to Great framework. Um, if
Yeah.
you had to pick just one element that most leaders underestimate, which one would it be? And if you can also share a glimpse of this framework, and then definitely our listeners will be very, very curious to explore more about it.
Yeah, we'll definitely, link it so that they can see it on the website and kinda get a little bit better of a glimpse of it, but I'll break it down, and then I'll share one that I feel like is lacking in both sides of the framework. So, the 8 degree, obviously 8 components in that, and the foundational 4 is what we believe that every company should be built on. And it's really, if you look at your business as a living organism, if you don't feed it with the foundational 4, you will inevitably be in a place where you're wondering, how did we get here? And why does our business just not feel like it's thriving? It's just running in circles trying to survive. So the foundational 4 is these 4 components: healthy leaders, vision, purpose driven, and values. And these 4 things, we know these things to be true. We've read the books, we've seen it play out, but we just don't believe in those things as much as we should. We know that they have the power to help transform our business and scale it, but it's almost like we don't see the immediate output, and so then we kind of ignore them sometimes. So here's the operational 4. So that was the foundational 4. The operational 4 is winning strategy, systems, core promises, and outcomes. Now I'll give you the ones that we see lacking the most in both sides, the foundational and the operational. In the foundational, we see companies lacking in vision. And I mean practical vision. It's just not enough to say, things like we want to make a global impact. Like that's great. I hope that you do. If you want to make a global impact, though, you're gonna have to get a lot more practical than that, and you're gonna have to break down that vision into a very practical mindset. So, we like to say that vision needs to have a few characteristics or components in it to make it a holistic vision. One, you do need revenue in that. You need to understand where you see your company going as far as revenue, because when you work backwards, you're going to put things in place to actually raise your revenue. Um, I don't really like the term "you're growing or you're dying," but it does play out in a lot of practical senses. You companies that are like, "Well, we just want to stay here." Typically, that's not gonna work for many reasons. And one of the main reasons is because if you just wanna stay at a certain level, there are competitors out there, there's sharks, there's big companies that wanna come in and take you out. And, no matter which pocket, where you are in your communities, eventually, someone's going to take the market share that you don't want because you just wanna stay here, right? So vision's gotta have revenue. It also has to have these very practical, big characteristics. Like, we want to extend our ownership to multiple people, not just one person. Um, we want to be more system driven and integrate AI in the next 5 years, right? We want a full functioning e-commerce system, or we want to create 3 more territories because how we're going to get to that revenue is that we have to be able to duplicate what we're doing today in different territories. Like very, very practical. And so we would call these big characteristics and goals. And then there's this last part where you really just break it down into some very practical ways of how you're going to do that. And then this is the start of what you would say working backwards, if you will. And so if you say you want to, create an e-commerce in the next 5 years, right? And I'm using a very recent winning strategy session we just did. But if you use that one as an example, breaking that down backwards might say, this year we need to switch our platforms on what we're building our product lines on so that we can then actually create an e-commerce. So you've just worked backwards to where you said, hey, in the next year, maybe 2, we've got to do this in order to be able to get to that e-commerce platform. So that's what I mean by vision. On the operational side, the thing I see lacking the most is actually core promises. And this is one that's a little bit less known, if you will. But we pull this out because we see the best companies operating with core promises. So, what are core promises? These are essentially the absolutes that that employees and customers begin to know you for. And one of the most famous examples is Chick-fil-A. So Chick-fil-A is this, they have this purpose. And by the way, core promises are really rooted out of your purpose. Why do you do what you do? And one of the sentences in Chick-fil-A's purpose is to bring joy to the world. That's a very interesting one, but there's a lot more to their purpose than just that.
Mhm.
Derived from that is the famous termed expression, "my pleasure." So when you say thank you to a Chick-fil-A employee, they say, "My pleasure." This is a core promise. It's measurable. Did you say "my pleasure" genuinely, or did you not? This is what core promises are rooted in, is they get to know you and love you for these absolutes that they can depend on you for. So my pleasure in of itself does not bring any value to the employee, but when you say it because you actually provided a genuine customer service, now it brings tremendous value to a customer. Um, so go ahead. Sorry, I probably talked too long there. I apologize.
No, 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 no worries. But I like to connect this, with the quote that you mentioned, that people don't remember what you say, but they do remember how you made them feel. So I think that
Yes.
definitely connects with this example.
Yeah, and for core promises, one thing that I think is kind of interesting is for every company, it's gonna be different. But if you don't mean it, don't do it. But we would say honestly, 99% of companies that we see or know as a peer connection or that we work with don't have this. They don't have such an absolute that people know them for. And a lot of people want to revert back to quality. Well, quality is our core promise. Well, saying that you have a quality product is not a core promise to anybody. It needs to be measurable. If you think about a gym, if they say, "Hey, we're the cleanest gym," they need to have something that actually is measurable to that. So you might actually say, "We're the cleanest gym, and every hour we have someone that goes around and does cleanliness checks." Now it becomes measurable. So those are some examples of some things that we see lacking the most out of the framework that we use.
Yeah. That was really, really detailed explanation, really detailed in there. I mean, I wouldn't regret, uh, going, further of the time limit. But before we wrap up, Harrison, um, some critiques, and this is a bit of a nuanced, aspect, especially with your book, which is Exit Without Leaving. It's about building a business that runs without you. You mentioned initially, so that's what I'm going to now, conclude with. Now, some entrepreneurs, they believe that their constant presence is what guarantees success. It's once again, it's kind of that and kind of a sentimental value invested in it, that if I'm not there, this business is not going to run. And there are some examples where I have seen that even after selling business, um, entrepreneurs or owners, they're not able to let it go. um, and there's kind of differentiation, or differences in opinions, and contributions, or arguments in there. Do you think it's ever okay for a founder to remain kind of the linchpin in there?
That's a that's a great question, and yeah, that's why I, termed this phrase, "Build a business that thrives with you, but doesn't depend on you." Because at the end of the day, the owner should be involved, in my opinion. we've worked with businesses where the owner is in a different country or in a different region or just not involved. They just show up as kind of a board member. And although I do think that that can empower the people, I actually think that when the person who owns the business or people that own the business are actually involved in it, and that could look like a board member, don't get me wrong. It just needs to look in a way where they understand the business, right? So if you're not involved in the business to a point to where you don't really know how it operates, that's unhealthy, in my opinion. And I think there could be one-offs where maybe it works well, and I'm not gonna say that it's just a one way, right? Um, but the thing that I would say is that if you are the linchpin, if you're the thing that everything pivots on, that is gonna be a hard way to operate a business. So we do want it to thrive more with the owner. We want it to feel and really, mimic some of the values of the owner. Absolutely. But if you can't take a month off and the business doesn't run well, then you don't have that freedom. You don't have that business that really can operate without you. And the key in this is don't focus too much on the negative. Let's focus on the positive. What does it do when you do create a business like this? It actually empowers people, the next generation or the next line of top leaders who actually are going to feel empowered. They're going to be able to use their God-given skills and talents and be able to put them to use. And you're developing people to do something that you had to learn. And so one of the things that we say is whatever took you, if you think about going down a path of in just the woods, thick woods, whatever you had to cut down and make a path for, it should be easier for the person behind you to now follow that path. So where you had to crawl, they can now run. And I think that that is the goal that I'm speaking of is creating something that where your leadership is so good that people can actually step into spots where you had to literally crawl. Now they can run with it and make it even better. Harvey Firestone once said, "It is only as we develop others that we permanently succeed." And I truly believe that is that our permanent succession is when we allow others to develop and become who they're meant to be in our businesses, and that sounds a little soft sometimes, but at the end of the day, it hits the bottom line, and it truly does just share, with the everyone around you of what kinda leaders you are.
Exactly. Exactly. Ah, that's to be honest, beautiful. That's and I think it's such a wake up call because a lot of founders secretly wear their indispensable badge with pride. You know that
Yeah, yeah.
without me, but without realizing that it's actually limiting their freedom. So I think this is such a crucial point on which we conclude. And of course, Harrison, if our listeners they would like to connect with you, get access to your eight to grade framework and also your book Exit without leaving. What's the easiest way?
Yeah, if you go to our website, consultlivingwater.com, there's a connect with us page on there. Fill out the information. We would love to have conversation. If you want resources, like, I mean, we have lots of guidebooks, we have assessments, we obviously have a lot of frameworks that we use, models. We would be more than happy to share these with you. In our opinion, not getting paid for this is okay in some regard because sharing this stuff makes businesses better. But obviously, we are available to talk and have discussion and see what best fits you, whether it's the consulting, the coaching, or actually just sharing resources. Also, you can go to LinkedIn and just type in Harrison Tash, and would love to connect with you there. We have thousands of followers and connections that we'd love to have you join our network. And the book is coming out on Amazon in October. The 1st of October, the book will be out, ready for buy. So if you type in "exit without leaving" in Amazon, you could put by Harrison Tash, and obviously it'll show up there, and we'll be ready to sell those as well because we really want to get it into the hands of people who honestly want to build that business that truly thrives with them, but doesn't depend on them.
Super, super. Congratulations and all the best wishes, Harrison, for your book. And of course, listeners, I'll make sure to add all the details in the show notes for all of you. And I think if there's one thread running through today's conversation, like a flow in there, um, it's the backbone in there. I think it's this growth which is built on alignment, lasts. So it frees leaders to stop living in that, firefighting mode or the fight or flight mode, and it start leading with clarity and purpose. So thank you so much, Harrison, for sharing not just strategies, but I believe it's a vision of growth that gives business owners what they really admit they need: freedom. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on the podcast, and I hope the listeners, yeah, grab something from it. And beautiful podcast, by the way. It's very fun to get on here and banter with you on this stuff. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Harrison. And thank you to all the listeners for tuning into this episode of BizBlend. So, whether you are running a scrappy startup or a scaling enterprise, the question isn't just how do we grow, but it's how do we grow in a way that sustains people, processes, and purpose. Until next time, this is Sana on BizBlend reminding you that sustainable growth isn't about doing more, it's about doing what matters better. With that, thank you so much.